Hey Apex Agents, Mobius Y here with another video for Mass Effect Andromeda's multiplayer. Today's yet another two-part character build guide, taking our first glimpse at one of the ultra-rare characters, finally, and today we're taking a look at the Asari Duelist. Now the Duelist is actually pretty aptly named in that she is especially effective at taking on targets one at a time. She's not so good at attacking groups of enemies. In fact, if you find yourself regularly doing that, chances are you're probably going to get downed a lot because you're simply kind of just doing that wrong. Or at least I should say for this kind of build or a similar build, if you do it akin to what I'm going to showcase in this particular video, you kind of want to avoid groups of enemies, essentially. This particular build, I focused on mobility, melee damage, using the powers in combination with the melee attacks and personal survivability. And you'll see why I went through all these powers by the end of it. I'll explain better how they all synergize really well with the particular playstyle that I adopted on this character. I had a lot of fun with this character. It took me a while to come up with something that I really liked. I got her all the way up to about level 15 before I realized, hey, if I combine these in this certain way, I can figure out a way to chain these powers and her melee attacks together in order to make it an effective fighting force. So this particular character build has a heavy emphasis, wow, speaking is hard lately, on melee damage. So let's start by going into the power breakdown. Backlash I took all the way to rank 6. This was the last power that I leveled up. It didn't get to rank 6 until I was all the way up to level 20 with this character. At ranks 4 and rank 5, I went with the extra durability. The reason for this, as opposed to recharge speed and reflection, is backlash on this particular character. I wasn't really worried about getting reflection damage, not like, say, with the Asari Sentinel or the Human Guardian. This backlash was simply used to protect myself, to allow my shields a little bit of time to start recovering, as well as allow me to close the distance on whatever enemies that I wanted to come after. So maximizing the durability enables the shield to take a lot more hits. It takes a lot longer for something to die through the reflection damage, but it's much more durable. Almost twice as durable if you go the other route, pretty much. And at rank 6, I actually went with Damage Aftermath. Increases damage inflicted for 3 seconds after releasing backlash. Scales with the amount of damage absorbed by the Aegis. So you get an extra 20% gun damage bonus, 30% power damage bonus, and 30% melee damage bonus after releasing backlash. Of course, this damage is higher the more damage that you reflect with the Aegis. It will very rarely be much higher than you could get the maximum amount, because it's not too often where you put the backlash out and you keep it out there until the shield is broken from suffering too much damage. It's largely there just to put it out there, give yourself some time for your powers, like your charge, for example, to reset or close the distance so you can use your melee attack on a single enemy. So it won't give you a substantial melee damage bonus all the time, but it'll still nevertheless give you a melee damage bonus. Charge is the second power. This is the first thing to level up, so if you finally get this character to grade 10 through character cards, you'll want to max this out first. This is kind of your go-to keep myself alive kind of power, as well as offering crowd control and offering a damage bonus. At rank 4, I went with the extra radius. It still has just enough force at 625 newtons to stagger just about any mook or sub-boss, especially de-shielded sub-bosses. You'll find that a lot of shielded enemies, for example, Ket Anointed and Ket Destined, they don't stagger unless they're de-shielded when you hit them with the charge. Nevertheless, it has enough force to do that. Rank 5, weapons and melee. Since this is a melee-centric character, I went with this option at rank 5. Improves weapon and melee damage for 3 seconds after charging, so you get 15% bonus gun damage and 30% extra melee damage for 3 seconds, which is really nice. Rank 6, Bastion, fully restores shields and reduces incoming damage for 5 seconds. So for 5 seconds, you have 75 points of damage resistance, cutting all damage down by about 2/3. Roughly about that, not necessarily half. Not 2/3, about a third or so. You get an additional 50% shields restored, which stacks with the base 50% shields that are restored at rank 1 of charge, and you gain plus 40% extra damage on charge itself. So it hits decently well. Not a huge amount of damage from charge itself, but you'll find that it can finish off some very low health mooks and sub-bosses when you find yourself charging into a small group of them. If you decide to do that. And it also hits over a decent radius, 3.5 meters. You'll be able to stagger a whole group of mooks if you do find yourself rushing into them. Not what I recommend, but it is definitely doable. Lance left this at 1 point, and there's a reason for that. It still has an okay recharge time. The base amount is 10 seconds. That obviously gets improved, as we'll see in a little bit here. But it's largely because the tree does nothing for the rest of the character in order to be synergistic with the rest of the kit, or for this particular build, I should say. We'll get to more of that in a minute. Offensive biotics. At rank 4, I went with the extra power efficiency for plus 25% all power recharge speeds. This is super handy for reducing the cooldowns on your charge and your backlash. Rank 5, weapons and melee, plus 10% weapon damage, plus 30% melee damage. There is no point taking combo detonation because you only have detonators. You do not have any of your powers that can prime an enemy on its own, so there's no point going with that. So the weapons and melee is what you want, especially for that 30% extra melee damage. Rank 6, Biotic Warrior. Increases weapon and melee damage for 3 seconds after using a biotic power. During this time, melee attacks also knock down unarmored, unshielded, standard-sized enemies. Plus 15% weapon damage bonus, plus 50% melee damage bonus, and plus 15% melee force. I hope you're starting to see a bit of a trend here with this particular build. Let's move on to Barrier. This was the second thing that I leveled up, with Offensive Biotics being third, in order to make the kit very synergistic with Biotic Charge. So at rank 4, I went with Unyielding Barrier, plus 30% max shield. Just gives you more shields to deal with when you charge into something. You essentially recover more hit points by using your Biotic Charge and getting all your barrier back. Rank 5, Barrier Drain, partially restores shields with each successful melee attack. You restore 15% of your own personal shields whenever your melee attack connects with somebody. So this does offer a little bit of survivability, but it's not going to save your life against groups of enemies or a couple sub-bosses or something like that. It also gives you plus 50% melee damage, which is really nice. Rank 6, Saving Barrier. Automatically restores shields upon reaching low health on a cooldown. So the Saving Barrier cooldown is 15 seconds. It'll restore 100% of your shields when you're at 20% or less health. This will save your butt a lot. There's some times where you get caught out and you make a bad charge, or you just make a bad move altogether, and this winds up giving you just enough time for you to get your backlash out and protect yourself for a little bit until your charge resets, and you can either get out of there or you can regen your shields and stagger a bunch of people, allowing you to continue the powers and melee chain. And I only have this character at grade 10, but this particular setup only gets stronger with the veteran bonuses as the power damage increases and the melee damage will increase. So hopefully you've picked up on the trend with this particular character. With the combination of the Biotic Warrior upgrade at rank 6 of Offensive Biotics, where you get plus 50% melee damage bonus, you also get plus 30% melee damage bonus for a few seconds after charging an enemy. So you essentially get roughly an 80% melee damage bonus for 3 seconds after using Biotic Charge. You also get a gun damage bonus of about 30% as well. And you get a gun and melee damage bonus again whenever you release Backlash. Of course, this can vary depending on how much damage you reflect with the Backlash shield. So essentially, you get a melee damage bonus every time you use a power, and you want to chain your powers in order to try and keep that melee damage bonus up as much as possible with the Biotic Warrior upgrade. It makes the difference between one-shot killing a mook with your melee and not one-shot killing a mook and having to use another power or use your gun for a moment and shoot it just a couple times. So Lance has its uses. You can simply cast it on a mook who is by itself in cover and too far away for you to melee just yet. So you hit it with a lance, you cause it to stagger a little bit. It could be something like a Ket Chosen or an Outlaw Raider or even a Remnant Assembler. You hit it with a lance, you cause it to stagger a bit, and while it's staggering, you close the gap until you're close enough to use your melee, and you finish it off in a single hit. Similar thing with charge. You charge into, 3 mooks, like 3 Ket Chosen, which I've done before. I don't really recommend it until you get used to playing this particular play style. You charge into 3 mooks, 3 Ket Chosen, get staggered. You hit one of them with a melee while they're all still staggered. You kill that guy. You pop your backlash to protect yourself a little bit from the other 2 guys until you figure out which one you want to hit with your next melee. You melee the second one, kill him, and then you hit the third one with a lance to stagger him so that you can close the gap and kill him with a melee attack as well. The list goes on, and that whole time that you use that combination of powers, you are maintaining your melee damage bonus through the combination of the Biotic Warrior upgrade as well as the damage bonuses you get from casting Backlash and Charge. It's really effective, it's really intense, and really fun. So, weapons and equipment. The biggest problem with melee characters is de-shielding sub-bosses so that they can be crowd-controlled better. So, in order to do that, I went with the Rieger Carbine. I have come to really like using this weapon on this character. It's the perfect fit. It can equip the Shotgun Melee Enhancer mod, and you can also put on the barrel mod to increase the damage. So right after you charge a sub-boss, for example, a Ket Anointed, which are really dangerous to this character in particular, you charge the Ket Anointed, you take off some of its shields, not much, just a little bit, with your charge, and then you blast your Rieger Carbine for about 1.5 seconds until it is de-shielded, and it will happen very quickly. You will de-shield it very quickly with the gun damage bonuses you get because you used your charge, and then when it's de-shielded, you can use your melee attack and kill it once it is down to strictly health. For equipment, I can't recommend enough structural ergonomics to further reduce the cooldowns of your powers by an additional 25%. Definitely recommend going that route. You could go with hydraulic joints if you really wanted to maximize your melee damage as much as possible. Another option is also the Martial Biotic Amp, which increases biotic power damage and melee damage. That's not a terrible option. Juggernaut Shield is also an option as well. Increases shields by 20% with a little bit of extra melee damage bonus. But I can't recommend enough with the structural ergonomics. It just makes the cooldowns on charge and backlash so much more tolerable when you combine it with the cooldown reductions within the powers tree in particular. And for consumables in the gameplay, I used a universal power amp and a strength enhancer. But for an additional power amp, you could do a biotic power amp, which will increase the damage of your charge and your lance a little bit, but you could also definitely do a power efficiency mod. I never used one myself, but it will definitely make a difference on your cooldowns if you use it. Personally, I just stuck with a universal power amp because I have a butt ton of them, and it doesn't really offer much less of an improvement that a simple biotic power amp does. For sure, you want to use a strength enhancer as your second booster, though, because your melee is going to be your main source of damage. It works even against sub-bosses and bosses once they have been adequately damaged enough for you to finish them off with your melees. And that essentially sums it up for this build. I was actually getting pretty excited as I leveled this character up more, gelling with the playstyle, figuring out the timing of combining the powers and melee chains so that you can maximize the damage that you're constantly dishing out with this character's melee attacks. It's a very fun playstyle. It's fast-paced. It's pretty intense. It requires a good sense of timing, so it will definitely take some getting used to. Personally, it's a little trickier to use off-host, in my personal opinion, because, for example, the dodge on this character isn't like the other Asari, where they kind of do this biotic slide across the ground, but she's like the human guardian and the human commando in that she teleports. Which personally kind of drives me a little bit nuts because it can be very finicky off host, but it's definitely workable. It adds a lot of mobility to this character. You can even use it to teleport through walls, and even the melee attack will do just that. The melee attack having quite a bit of range with that teleport effect. So that'll sum it up for part 1 of today's character build guide. For part 2, where you see this exact same build in action, check the link in the description below for some gameplay on gold difficulty. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this particular build, or if there are anything you prefer to change about it, what you like about this character, what you dislike about this character in general. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the battlefield. Good luck, Apex.